I am unashamed. What about you?
So here we go. We got Zach in studio yet again.
No, it feels
Record 3 podcasts in a row, Zach.
feels right.
I got a feeling it may be 4.
Yeah, it'll be. I bet it will be.
I'm hoping.
I bet it'll be 4.
I'm hoping. So you mentioned yesterday, we never talked about it, but you had mentioned it off air that we, Layla and Mia, have a new partnership or something. What'd you say? What's going on with the
Yeah, so Layla's moving to Nashville,
I know my daughter told me this.
and she's going to room with your daughter, which made me nervous.
Really?
Yeah, started having flashbacks when I roomed with my cousin, your brother, and it didn't work out so
They're in
well.
a lot better place.
Those were
than
the
you
dark
and Jeff
years of your life.
I was like, don't do what I did. Don't do what me and Jet did.
I found out today a family of some dear friends of ours, their sons are about the same age as us. That they're going to be in the scene in the new movie, and it was so great because the young man that's playing me, our stories are so similar. It just worked out that way. I mean, he didn't, it's not like anybody really knew that, but we had just done some. They just got married, so we'd done premarital counseling. And it was a neat thing to think.
Yeah.
How the big circle comes back around,
Yeah.
So it was, I was kind of excited to hear about that. So, and that's what you're doing here, working on the movie.
Working on the movie.
This week.
Go to, let me get my voice, go to theblindmovie.com. Is that better, Jace?
That was way better. I don't think they probably didn't air me
Making fun of Zach.
making fun of you. I just said, look, not some people, we all have quirks. And so Zach's quirk is when he's telling about a commercial
Like an ad
or
or
an ad, he goes into World Wrestling voice color commentary.
Let's get ready to rumble.
It's like you're on the radio now, and all of a sudden it's sign up, be the 5th caller, and we will send you a prize. So I don't know it.
It started like back when we first started the podcast because Zach would fill in for me when I was gone.
you were out.
And
I've
so-
never laughed so hard when Zach did the commercials. And look, it wasn't like I was laughing because I could do a better job. Everyone knows I'm terrible about doing the commercial. I can't function, but I need to find my World Wrestling voice.
Well, I think the best part was you and Phil coaching me. Like I don't even know. I don't think we ever aired that part.
No, we should have.
Yeah, you guys coaching me on how to do the ads was the best part because it was not you're 2 years.
Well, early on, Blaze was like, "Well, we'd like to get Jace and your dad to do more on the ads." I said,
Hey,
it ain't happening.
We tried it.
We tried it. It
was
went
crickets.
nowhere.
It was just, I'd look at the paper, I'd turn to the mic, and I'd say, I just can't do it.
Yeah, it was hard.
My brain, as y'all know, has issues.
We all have our talents.
doesn't work
We
that
all
way.
have our thing we bring to this table.
It takes a village.
So they were straightening it up earlier. Cade was, I said the discussion in the last 2 podcasts was so vibrant that this table, which weighs a ton because somebody built it for us. It's like an old flatbed in the back of a diesel truck. That's where it came from. The thing is heavy, but our discussion in Mark chapter 11 was so vibrant that the table moved.
It did.
Based on our last 2. Yeah, they were having to reposition it today. So
Well, I got in here this morning. I don't know how this happened, but I look at my seat, and it's just mud, like all in the seat.
Because Phil puts his feet in your seat.
Ah, okay.
It's called a footrest.
Okay,
I thought he was one of these germaphobes. he was
over
down
here
there.
cleaning
He
and-
was really cleaning, and I thought, I wonder why he's doing that for. He's scared of germs.
There's about 6 inches of mud on the seat.
That's been compiled over several podcasts.
I got it. I
I got
didn't know.
news for you. There is a strong possibility that that's not mud.
They got a lot of dogs at the house. Just so you know.
Well, that would have been better left unsaid.
I know you said you had sinus issues.
Yeah.
Because when I walked in, my first thought was, what does that smell? Yeah. I'll tell you what I did. For everybody, reading about the humble king, I guess, I actually changed a poopy diaper last night.
Oh, impressive.
I think it was my first. I've changed diapers with my kids, but I won
Been
the
a
lottery.
20-year run since then.
Yeah, And
Throwaway diapers was a breakthrough. They just take them off, throw them in the trash. The women, I saw them when they they shook them a little bit and washed them in a washing machine and dried them. And I mean, it was a lot of stuff being washed and dried every day with kids.
Yeah.
You know, so
too expensive, you know.
But they come up with this throwaway diapers. That was a
Game changer.
Well, because I hadn't seen him because he was in Nashville with Missy for about a week, and then I was incredibly busy yesterday. So I hadn't seen the guys. Missy, so I was like, Missy, you gonna get him? Because I could hear him. Ah! And she said, oh, he just woke up. He's fine because he woke up early from his nap.
Yeah.
But I was like, he's standing up in that bed. She's like, if you want to go get him, go get him. So I was like, okay. But when I walked into the room, I thought,
Uh-oh.
ooh, I know why he's crying. I know why he woke up early.
You know why he's standing.
And so I'm not going to lie, when I popped that diaper open, it triggered a gag reflex. My eyes started watering because the look of it, too. Because when I came down, I was like, Missy, do you realize that he's not chewing up his food?
It's just going straight through.
It's just going down the hatch.
Yeah.
She said, that's why we're cutting it into little pieces. I said, well, you need to train him. What is the protocol for chewing the food? Yeah. I said, he just pooped. And she said, I'll change it. I was like, no, I changed it. Well, she was shocked. She fell over on the couch. And I was like, no, I changed it after I gagged for a couple of minutes.
So we went from eye rolls the day before to falling off the couch.
And falling out.
You're making progress.
But then it caused quite the argument about why there are hunks of food that look like it had never been chewed. He's just sending it down the hatch.
Yeah.
She's like, I mean, were you inspecting it? And I was like, yeah.
Well, you're down there. I mean, yeah, it's like, it's a rough business, man.
Oh, that was rough. So I learned a valuable lesson. Be careful when you say, I'll go get him.
One of the positive things.
You were better than me.
One of the positive things that happens, you can look at it two ways, but I lost all sense of smell.
Yeah.
Over the last
next time this happens, I'm calling you.
Yeah, I can't smell it.
That's what got me. It wasn't the
no matter how rank it is, you say, is any of that smell touching you? Not a bit. So it's just...
This would have been a good test.
Now, if there's smoke somewhere, something is fixed to catch on fire. If you have no smell, you can miss things like that.
But what about
you
this?
Can't even smell smoke.
Now, how about this though? I have a problem.
I can't like a good meal's cooking. You say, boy, it smells good. No, not.
Well, listen to this. I have a problem that I don't consider a problem, but I have a quirk. Since we're talking about quirks.
I'm shocked Jason would have a quirk.
I'll share one.
The least quirky person I know.
No, this is a quirk I have. So when I'm frog hunting or fishing, or when I put my hand on the frog, I immediately smell it frying in peanut oil. I literally get the smell.
It's Pavlov's dogs.
So is that just memory?
That's like a classical conditioning, and that's what that is.
Yep.
Pavlov's dog?
Yeah.
I've never heard of it.
It's an experiment where he would ring the bell every time he would feed the dogs. So he'd feed the dogs, bang, ring the bell. Feed the dogs, bang, ring the bell every single time. And so then he came back and he rang the bell, and the dogs began to salivate because they had been conditioned to respond to the bell with food.
That was dinner bell.
Are you calling me a dog?
I'm saying you've been classically conditioned.
Yeah.
So now you have a physiological
you did it to
response. You did it to yourself.
What I'm saying is, Phil, why don't you try that?
I could try it.
Because it seems like your memory would trigger the smell.
Yep.
Did you lose the smell during COVID? Is that what happened?
No, I lost them, and they said you got a little. What's the old? Every older man gets it. What they call it? It's
the prostate infection.
Prostate infection. So and they had the.
Well, what's that got to do with the nose?
That's the other end.
But they had to get such a powerful dose of it.
Oh,
that's why I am. I hadn't had enough medicine. But boy, when they put me on that, it was the most powerful
making me
thing.
queasy, Phil.
Antibiotic. So I came out of there. They fixed it. They fixed it all right. But They fixed it up where I never smell again. A little bit
Phil,
over on
come
the
out
jet
there.
pipe. They had a drip above me in there. I crawled to get in the vehicle to get up there. I just crawled along.
Yeah.
You couldn't.
He had
Phil came
E.
out,
coli
look.
That
bacteria.
prostate goes. I'm just giving you young bucks.
You were in a bad spot.
That was a bad spot. For me to go to the doctor was a bad spot.
I've told our Dad. I've told our urologist because we shared the same guy, and I told him I'm breaking the generational curse of not listening to what the doctor said. I watched Paul. I watched you crawling on the floor. I was like, no.
Well, Paul,
when I get an issue, I go in, tell me what I need to do. I'm doing it.
am I remembering correctly that our grandfather had a testicle rot off before he never went to the doctor?
I wouldn't say that. It became noticeable to everyone that there was a problem.
There was a swelling issue.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be delicate, but
I remember like
Zach went there.
I have like a vague memory of something with
Swelling issue quickly deteriorated into the smelling issue.
Oh man. Well, he never went to the doctor.
I will
right?
not
Right,
embellish.
never went, no.
I will not embellish, but since we'll keep this PG-13, it went from playing marbles to picking grapefruits without any embellishment.
That's true.
The old doctor told Miss Kay, he said, "Oh, I know what he's saying, that he's not coming and all that." I said, "Oh, I'm not going to fool with that. Said give me a little medicine, something, knock it out." No, you have to come up here. This is antibiotics. We don't have but one that will actually cure that. I mean, and it's powerful. And he told Kay, he said, he'll be here. He'll be crawling, but he'll be here.
Yeah.
It'll get so bad, he'll have to
Was
come.
he right?
He was right.
He was right.
It's hard for a Robertson.
And I had
It hurt my feelings and it hurt my smell greatly.
So that was your curse for not listening. You
mean,
could have held on to that smell because he had the pills. But Dad tells Dan, he said, "Don't tell Al and Miss Kay," because I was at the doctor.
Yeah.
Don't tell him, but I ain't taking these pills.
Well, I'm glad me sharing my vulnerabilities of doing my first doo-doo diaper allowed us to share
That was
our-
quite the rabbit hole.
Most people rush, that I've noticed, family members or not, rush rapidly into pills. And it's such a worldwide phenomena.
No, it is.
I'm
You're
just
right.
saying the pills, in my humble opinion, is overrated.
Well, in your
Put it like that.
defense of your argument, Mom had major problems from taking too many antibiotics.
Yep.
She in her gut,
She got C. diff.
She got C. diff, that's what happens to older people when you take a lot of antibiotics. So you're right. I mean, you got to have a balanced way. If you got E. coli in your body, you got to deal with that thing, or it'll kill you.
Well, in most things in life, moderation is usually an excellent choice.
That's right.
But
I thought the old salt, the salt water, fresh salt water around New Zealand, that's where we get the little
The
tablet.
pristine waters,
Pristine
Omega
water.
XL.
Yeah.
Omega
It's a free
XL.
ad for
Free
Omega.
ad for Omega XL.
Take a little shot of those, 2 or 3 or 4 of them, every day. That and 1 baby aspirin. That's it.
Which is good. Both those are
An
excellent.
occasional antibiotic when you almost die.
I think he's only had 1 or 2 of those.
Just 1 or 2 in my life so far. Yeah, I stay
is
away
But
from
I
it.
didn't realize that you lost your sense of smell.
Oh, yeah.
Over that episode.
There is a downside to
Yeah.
taking too many antibiotics, and I'm just
You had
saying
to take it intravenous.
they overuse it, over dispense it. In my
If
humble
you had
opinion.
to lose one, that would probably be my first choice.
Has it messed up your ability to enjoy food?
Taste is fine,
You can taste, you just can't smell.
and taste it, but can't smell it.
Sometimes
Maybe
you lose
one of our
both.
viewers will have some kind of.
Oh, I will get
Somebody
them.
will come to my rescue out there in computer land. You're
By the
going to
way-
tell somebody else I don't have a computer. That's another thing that'll
All the
drive you
emails
nuts.
I'm getting about wasp stings, remedies, ways to kill them. I appreciate that. I'm
yeah.
glad you enjoyed.
We're still looking for a sponsor.
That's
on
right.
on
An
the
exterminator.
exterminator side. So make sure y'all reach out to us about that.
All right, let's take a break. So I know how it is. 'Tis the season. We're trying to find that perfect gift here in November and into early December for Christmas. And so we've got one for you. It's one of our favorite sponsors of our podcast, Tommy John. And I admit, I've been a big Tommy John fan long before they were sponsors of our podcast because they just simply have a great product. And, underwear is something that everybody needs. Comfortable, loungewear as well. Everybody will love it. It's something that you can even get them for yourself if you want to, but they're great for gifts. You don't really have customers at Tommy John. You have fanatics. So they have what they call their Joy of Cozy season, and we love that. Every gift is backed by Tommy John's best pair you'll ever wear, or it's free guarantee. So they got pajamas. They got a lot of stuff to choose from. Good to buy for your wife for your husband, girlfriend, whatever. So check them out. Shop Tommy John's Cyber Monday sale right now. You get 33% off everything, plus free shipping at TommyJohn.com/Phil. It's one of Tommy John's biggest sales ever and of the year. So 33% off everything, plus free shipping at TommyJohn.com/Phil. See their site for details. All right, y'all ready to get into Mark 12?
I think we need to, just for credibility.
Yeah, because that went off the rails.
Yeah.
Way to go,
Unplanned. That's sad. That's what's in our reservoir, what we just talked about.
Well,
It was a traumatic. It was a traumatic night for me. I mean, when I peeled that diaper up back, I don't know what to tell you. I didn't plan on sharing that story, but that was traumatic.
Still right there in your brain.
Yeah, I've.
No, you got to get that out. You can't let that.
That's right.
Yeah, you got to.
Can't let that fester.
You got to share that.
Tell you what I did do is I went down and patted my wife on the back and said, "I really appreciate everything you do around." Because she said, that's one of hundreds. I was like, "Oh, I get it.
That's just she was lauding you for being great, just so that you'd keep on changing the diapers and not her. She pulled it off. One time I was.
You get in there and wash out.
I was caught there alone with you, and she was somewhere. But I mean, it was like if I was there just with a child, I didn't have to go. I never found myself in that situation. Except one time.
She made sure you were there.
You never forgot it.
I actually changed the diaper and wiped your butt and got you back in business. But I didn't like it.
Well, thank you, Dad. I'm so appreciative you just let me sit in it.
Well, it's good. It was a bucket list.
Yeah, I was learning.
It was a bucket list thing for me.
I was raised by teenagers on a college campus.
Yeah.
Just let that sink in.
Yeah.
That it's a miracle that I'm even at this table. I mean, you and Mom were teenagers.
Yeah.
On a college campus in couples housing. That's how I was raised. My first
old school said.
Think about your daughters in college.
Men produce children. They don't take care of them once they.
Yeah, I'm glad we came a long way from that.
Yeah, it's much better to. It takes a village and a family. It's better.
How do you want to do 12? I mean, we finished, I believe, at the end of Mark 11 over this authority question.
In the last, and just to give a quick recap, for folks, we in Mark 11 we sort of shifted gears. Jase gave us a sort of a look ahead.
Mark shifted gears.
Well, right,
yeah.
Mark shifted gears. We just noticed it, and because now we're centering in on the last 8 days of Jesus being on, well, not on the earth, but because he appeared for 40 days after.
Well, until he revolutionized the earth.
Yeah, until he came back from the dead, and so he comes into Jerusalem. We talked about that. Then there was this situation where he curses the fig tree and he clears the temple, and all that had a lot of meaning beyond just the simplicity of the two acts. And then we had this, the last thing we looked at is his authorities question, and I think this kind of takes us into the next chapter because now we're kind of moving into a authority issue.
Well, because now he's embracing the fact that he is king, he's the son of David, and that he's here in public. The people have created this. I mean, I don't like the phrase triumphal entry. I can't think of a better phrase for that. I guess that's what we call it. But what would be a better? I mean, it's like going public.
Yeah,
we're going public with who the Lord is, who He is.
Right.
Now, it was
Remember,
comical.
He has to roll it at some point. I am God.
Well, right,
and you can do try to. Human beings can do a lot with acting and all of this stuff, But to be the actual God who became flesh, that's a tough sell for most human beings.
But look,
Then and now.
This was his coming out party. Yep.
And he's picking a fight here in the temple.
Yep.
I mean, that's not what he was doing, but that's what he was doing. Because he's deemed as a threat.
Right.
Once he's embracing this, and you got to remember, he's won the crowd over through this resurrection of Lazarus.
Correct.
So these people now it's looking like this is some kind of insurrection, rebellion type movement. And so it helps you understand, because the religious leaders, they're like trying to position themselves in how they're going to deal with this. The politicians are trying to position themselves. And so when you get in with that in mind, it gets to the end.
While you're there, Jace, when Jesus said, who's really going to come up against me and the problems, when he started in Mark chapter 8 and Matthew chapter 16, he began to explain to his disciples he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things.
Where you at, Phil?
This is Matthew 16, when he first announced it, and Mark does it in chapter 8, but he still identifies, for lack of a better term, his enemies. He will suffer many things. You say, well, who's going to be doing all this, causing you all these problems? At the hands of the elders. The elders who worked at the temple were under the law of chief priests. They're part of the group that's against me, and they're going to kill me. And teachers of the law, and I must be killed. He identifies his enemies. He identified them. And when you get to Mark chapter 9, 10, 11, that same group, you put it in three groups there when you wrote about it, Al. The Herodians.
Well, he's going to mention them in 13 of chapter 12 when it says, later they sent some of the Pharisees and Herodians to Jesus. And then when you get to verse 18 of 12, which we're in chapter 12, we get a argument from the Sadducees. So you got Sadducees, Pharisees.
But he's identified the group of the law keepers under the law of Moses. They're his enemy.
Well, the chief priests, teachers of the law, and the elders, that's in 11:27.
Yep.
And I think that's who he's speaking to.
Jason, I want to read this because you made a good point a minute ago that we didn't talk about in the last podcast. Lazarus' resurrection was a real tipping point.
It was a catalyst
for this whole thing. And I want to remind you of this. This is from John 11. So after he raised him, therefore many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did put their faith in him. So that was obviously the people. They're excited now.
He's God, and they're not.
Right.
Wait, look, before you read this, you got to take time out here. This is not some clever story that somebody come up with. I mean, just picture someone you love, your cousin, your son, your wife, and they die. And you go to the funeral. And then 3 or 4 days later, they're back and you're eating a meal with them.
Yeah.
Now, you want to become this is greater than your favorite football team winning, or you win the lottery. You're like, I don't know if I won the lottery. That'd be the greatest day of my life. No, you're one of your closest people in your life.
Brother,
You went to his funeral, and now you're eating a meal. You're back. You're having a party. I mean, so what you say? What does that lead to? That leads to people doing whatever they want to do. They're no longer concerned with government, politics, religious leaders, cultural traditions. This was a life change. I mean, I think you got to make that a strong point, because this is what actually contributed to Jesus eventually dying. Because the people, they're going crazy here, and that's why he keeps going there every night. And I think they're whipping everybody out. Everybody's excited. And meanwhile, Jesus is now going public, so they're like, now we're talking.
It's time.
Now we don't care that you're on the donkey. You raised my cousin from the dead. I'm going with him. That's what was happening.
Yeah, until he died, and then it had to happen again with his resurrection. So here's verse 46. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Then the chief priests and the Pharisees called a meeting. Uh-oh. Got to call a meeting.
Yep.
Sanhedrin. What are we accomplishing, they said. Here is this man performing many miraculous signs. If we let him go on like this, think about that statement. If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him.
If we let him.
And that sounds fantastic. But here was their problem, Jace. And then the Romans will come and take away both our place and our nation.
Yep, that's it.
That's when we shift into the
It's
political
good.
gear.
So the teachers of the law, the Pharisees, the chief priests and the elders, they have this dissertation at the end of 11 about, with Jesus, because they said, where did you get this authority?
Yeah.
That's
What gave you the authority and who gave you the authority?
Yeah.
Those are two questions.
So Jesus.
Hang on, let's take a break. So obviously the Christmas season, the reason why it's so important is we celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ. And we also celebrate Mary's choice to have him. She was a teenage girl. She wasn't married. She was betrothed, and she made a decision for life. And so she really set the example for the rest of us. That's why life is so important to us on the Unashamed podcast, and also to some of our really good friends at 40 Days for Life. One of my favorite pro-life groups. They've got 1 million volunteers in 1,000 cities. They believe that prayer can work in this spiritual warfare of decision-making when someone's in a situation they hadn't planned for and there's a life at stake. And so they pray for that. They have vigils all around the world and all around the country where they're praying for good decisions for women to make the choice for life. And so we want to join these guys. We want to support them. Check out their locations. They've got a podcast. They have a free magazine as well that kind of keeps you up to date on what's happening in the pro-life movement, especially now that we've moved into what we call post-Roe America. And by the way, that means we're going to be working more and harder, not less. So check them out. They are at 40daysforlife.com. That's the number 40daysforlife.com. Check them out. See what you can do to help them and support them.
So Jesus comes up with one of many clever things we're fixed to read. Now, look, they're kind of hard to wrap your head around. I mean, they are, and I thought about this before we started this today, because chapter 12 can be complex, just like the end of chapter 11 was. And what amazes me about Jesus is that when it comes to your personal relationship with him and him talking, it's simple. Mm-hmm. I mean, everything is simplified. When it comes to politics and your nation or your religious bureaucracy or the rules, all of a sudden he gets real complex and hard to follow, which I think is one funny.
2,000 years later, over 2,000 years later, these factions, they call them left, they call them right, they call them progressive, and
communists.
They're all still there.
Yep.
His enemies are still there.
And they're and afraid. The same motivation is what the somebody bigger is going to come in and take our place.
All right, and we're going to get to that. Look, I'm trust me. I had just a moment last night, just in research, that when I got to,
was it before or after the diaper change?
This is way after. You had to go through the wilderness. It was a stinky wilderness. And then I had some other problems come up just in my life.
I just wonder how the Almighty worked that out.
At about 10 o'clock, it all got quiet. Everybody was gone. The phone was no longer, people were no longer trying to call. I talked to you last night, about 8, somewhere in there. And then all of a sudden, I started studying. And I think I looked up at about 1 a.m. after I had read and researched chapter 12, the paragraph about paying taxes to Caesar. You remember that? Paying the imperial tax.
Right.
And it led me to Luke 6, which I hopefully will get there, because what Jesus is introducing here, and I think Zach coined the phrase, he's turning their kingdom upside down. But it's not about Jesus is a better king. You remember in Hebrews, talked about he's better. This is about revolutionizing your concept of kingdom.
Yeah.
Because it's actually the exact opposite.
With immortality being part of the deal. immortality.
And just to give an overview of what I'm going to be discussing from Luke 6, when you think about what makes a king or a politician important, well, what do they have to do? They have to get elected, or they have to have, if it's a monarchy, they have to have
the bloodline.
Have the bloodline. And so what makes them be influential? And there's 4 things that's going to come from Luke 6. I mean, look, this is going to be eye-popping, because when you compare that to who Jesus is and what he's introduced in the kingdom, and just if y'all disagree, but number 1, power. You got to have power if you're going to be influential.
Yeah.
Number 2, success. Because if you're not successful, guess what? They'll either kill you or not elect you.
Move you out.
Yeah. Number 3, comfort. Because you say, what is comfort? It goes along with success and power. These people are comfortable. They have people doing stuff.
Yep.
Well, and 4, recognition. So, and you'll see those. I mean, it's Luke. I didn't get this out of a book. It's Luke. It's Luke
spot
6.
on with that thinking about that. That's exactly right.
It's Luke 6, and maybe it's helpful. I mean, maybe through the Holy Spirit is telling me to read this before we read our text. But Luke 6 is an unusual thing. But Jesus, he says, and I'll show you where I got that. It's a version of the Sermon on the Mount when he says in verse 20, "Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you will be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when men hate you, when they exclude you and insult you and reject your name as evil." So these people that Jesus just described are not powerful, successful, and worldly, comfortable, or recognized. They're actually being persecuted, right? Mm-hmm. But look at the opposite when he says, "Rejoice in that day," verse 23, "for great is your reward in heaven, for that is how their fathers treated the prophets. But woe to you," here we go, "who are rich, for you have already received your comfort. Woe to you who are well fed, for you will go hungry. Woe to you who laugh, for you will mourn and weep. Woe to you when all men speak well of you, for that is how their fathers treated the false prophets." I really think it's a great picture there of what Jesus is introducing. Yeah. Because you think about, what do you do with his worldly power, his worldly success, his worldly comfort, and his worldly recognition? He gave it all away.
Yeah.
I mean, the man don't have anything.
Right.
And so all the people he's fixed to do battle with, especially when this conversation with Caesar comes up, well, here, he's rich, he's powerful, he's comfortable, he's successful, he's recognized as king. I mean, that's really, he's turning on its head. So before I read the text in chapter 12, what's ironic about all this is most people in politics, they become powerful, successful, and comfortable and recognized when they're elected. But Jesus accomplished all those things when he was executed.
Yep.
It was a trap.
Yeah.
It was a spiritual trap, and by doing that, he basically revolutionized the world and introduced.
And one of the Apostle Paul said later on, if they had known that he was going to save the world, they wouldn't have crucified him.
Oh, he beat them at his own game.
They sure did.
Because even like the deal about Barabbas, when you think about it, he was less of a threat. Because what's he going to do? Well, he's just going to go out there and get him some more guerrillas, and here we go. Well, they're going to put him down. But what Jesus did, it was camouflage to their doom and failure. And I mean, I'm talking about making sinful decisions and being people of power, thinking you possess this power. Because all that stuff, it does is just change places.
Well, his ministry and kingdom was it was, like you said, it was not just a version. It wasn't a better version of the old way. It was a completely new way.
Oh, it was.
Which is why it was so threatening, where like Barabbas or anybody else for that matter that would come in, they weren't really a threat. I mean, they may be a little threat, but it's a threat that and you can control, and it operates inside of your framework. And then Jesus is coming here with a framework they don't need to understand, which is what I think he's getting at with this parable of the vineyard owner, which is pretty big scald on the leaders,
religious leaders. Oh, yeah, that's who he's going to throw under the bus first. Then he's going to throw Caesar sort of under the bus. But I was just going to make one other point. You got to realize that all these people in power and the politics that are involved that he's fixing to address, you think about what they say they're going to do. We're for the people.
Yeah.
But when you look, they're for the people who agree with them. Because if you challenge their power, they're not for you. And that's why they're trying to trap Jesus. They're like, well, this guy, we're not really sure we can control him.
Yeah.
And we're not sure what his stance is on various issues. And so that's where all these problems are coming. And look, what I'm getting at is when you look at what Jesus' kingdom brought, it brought freedom, vindication, rectifying injustice to all people. He was for all people. He's running around trying to make the best for everyone, which is really what our politics and religious leaders should be all about.
Right.
But when you have that power in a worldly kingdom setting, you have to protect it. And when people come up that are opposed to you, you destroy it.
What's the old saying, Zach? Absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Look, his promise to them, I'll give you love, I'll give you joy, I'll give you peace, I'll give you patience, I'll give you kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. I'll give you all that. That's what you'll receive if you just follow me.
Yeah.
Well, it was a hard sell then. Well, what about now, boys? What do y'all think?
Well, it is.
Still a hard sell. Let's take another break.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned, Lord Acton said it. He said that power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So when you consolidate power like that, like we're just not meant to handle, that kind of thing. But I do think that so much of this goes back to power, and I'm so glad you mentioned that, Jace. I mean, that's really what happens is when you get in power. Like the biggest threat then becomes, what if I lose power? Mm-hmm. And then what the modus operandi is of us as humans is then we begin to the ends justify the means, and so we start compromising on things. We see this all the time in politics. We talk about it even in conservative politics, which we're conservative, but it's not. Conservatism is not the end goal, right? I mean, as Jesus people, I mean, we're a part of a different kingdom, and so as long as your side's winning, then you're good with whatever. As long as you win, as long as we get to the end of what and we'll justify these things, and then you look over a couple generations, and and now even quicker than that, these movements get corrupted very rapidly, and I think that's what was so threatening here about what's going on with Jesus, because you think about even inside the Jewish community, you've got political factions there in this setting.
Exactly.
In Matthew's account, you have the Sadducees and the Pharisees, and they're not on the same team.
No,
right?
Well, even in but the what I'm referencing to about paying taxes to Caesar, you have the Pharisees and the Herodians. Well, they're not on the same team at all politically. But they've joined forces because why? We have a threat here. That's right. That's why I said
the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and Jesus is the enemy. He's stands in opposition to kind of the Roman Empire, the Herodians, the Pharisees. I mean, he's like this figure that he's bringing this kingdom and it's you see it in Daniel. That's what Daniel said. All these other kingdoms are going to fall. Yep. But then there's this other one coming.
Right. That's why Mark lays the stories out the way he does in this chapter. Is he's showing the forces aligning, because this is how they're going to make it happen.
Yeah. So let me read this. So we get to chapter 12, and he began to speak to them in parables. Look, this parable's pretty easy to understand.
Which is funny because you mentioned it a minute ago about
Mark
simple
12.
and complicated, but this is one of the easier parables.
Mark 12, because look,
this is like a thing. This is like the spotlight is being turned on, and
right.
This is an indictment.
Yeah.
Well, and look, I'll do this just for humor. That's not funny, but if I read chapter 12, verse 12 first, after he tells them the parable, whatever he tells them, and you got the groups here, the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders. I'm basing that on 11:27. But so 12:12 says, then they looked for a way to arrest him because they knew he had spoken the parable against them.
So whatever he said,
They got it.
And look, this was not a suitcase sermon, which we've made a joke about before. That one of those kind that if you give on Sunday, that they're going to say,
"Pack your bags."
That was great. No, never come back. But
they taught us in school about the suitcase sermon.
This was a coffin sermon.
Yeah, that's right.
And so here's what he says: a man planted a vineyard. He put a wall around it, dug a pit for the winepress, and built a watchtower. If you're looking for application right off the bat, I'll tell you, it had everything it needed to produce, and it was given. Then he rented the vineyard to some farmers and went away on a journey. At harvest time, he sent a servant to the tenants, which is another neat. Not only did it have the crop being planted, it had a wall around it, there's a pit for a wine press, they have a watchtower. It's now comes with servants to actually do the work. At harvest time, he sent a servant to the tenants to collect from them some of the fruit of the vineyard. But they seized him, beat him, and sent him away empty-handed. Then he sent another servant to them. They struck this man on the head and treated him shamefully. He sent still another, and that one they killed. He sent many others. Some of them they beat, others they killed. He had one left to send, a son whom he loved. He sent him last of all, saying, "They will respect my son." But the tenants said to one another, "This is the heir. Come, let's kill him, and the inheritance will be ours." So they took him, killed him, threw him out of the vineyard. What then will the owner of the vineyard do? He will come and kill those tenants and give that vineyard to others. And then he says, haven't you read this scripture? The stone the builders rejected has become the capstone or cornerstone. The Lord has done this, and it is marvelous in our eyes. So then they looked around trying to kill him, but it says, but they were afraid of the crowd, which is the crowd with Jesus, who has realized this guy can raise the dead. They left and went away. There it is.
That's a scald.
And I like in the, I think it was one of the other, it was in the, I think it was a Matthew account. Mark doesn't mention this, but it makes it worse when you throw this in there. When Jesus asked that question, what will he do to those tenants? They're so into the story, the crowd, that they say, he will bring those wretches to a wretched end.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he had them in the moment.
And he invoked the crowd, right?
And that's one of the reasons why they were like afraid to make a move. Let's take our last break.
And I think we need to point out that these were the teachers of the law, the scribes,
these are the power brokers.
And they were fully aware of Isaiah chapter 5.
Yep.
We're not fully aware of Isaiah 5. But if you read Isaiah 5, I will guarantee you, if you read the whole chapter, you will say, whoa.
Yeah.
It's scary.
It is.
But it starts off, it's like Jesus's version of Isaiah 5.
That's
and
right.
look, Isaiah 5 was written to the nation of Israel.
Yep.
It says it.
Yeah.
Clearly. This was a parable told to, I guess, the theology of the Jewish leaders of the nation of Israel. Or what is the word for that? Theocracy, I guess, would be a better word.
Yeah, these were the upper echelon power brokers. This was the clergy. These were the people.
And you're right, Jase, comparing it to a theocracy, because as far as their world was concerned, there were other political factors we've been talking about with Herod and also with the Romans, but their day-to-day lives, especially their relationship with God, these were the guys that had their hand on the scale. I mean, these were the guys that could kick you out. You know, they could stone you. They could kill you.
When you mentioned that, when it had the part about the inheritance, let's kill him and his inheritance can be ours. You think, what were they talking about? I mean, I think where did he just leave? The temple.
Yeah.
That was their stomping ground. That was where they were making their money. That was where they had their power and their structure and their control. So, I mean, I think a lot of this is tied up into the temple, you know, as a tangible kind of expression of what people.
No, there's no doubt.
And I like the way he compares the idea of Yahweh, the Father, as the one who's sending all these prophets and these people that they're killing. And then the Son. I love the way Jesus, even in this parable, humbles himself to the idea, because he was God too.
Yeah.
But he was like, I'm just the Son that came. I was the last one available to send to make a difference. And I'm so glad you brought up Isaiah 5, Jase, because Jesus being there when that was written and being there all the way through, because he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He was there. So it's like a little tip of the cap to way back in the old days of Isaiah. Remember back, and you're right, they knew that story. I mean, they knew Isaiah well.
And it's a woe story. And just to pick out a couple verses on it, I mean, the first 3 or 4 verses, he uses the same terminology with the watchtower and the wine press. And he gets down to verse 7, he says, the vineyard of the Lord is the house of Israel, and the men of Judah are the garden of his delight. And, so he clearly makes that connection to Zach's point, like verse 9, surely the great house will become desolate, the fine mansions left without occupants. So he's using a little prophetic language here on what happens when you rise up against the Lord. And so even a couple other things that kind of scary, like verse 14, therefore the grave enlarges its appetite and opens its mouth without limit, and into it will descend their nobles in masses with all their brawlers and revelers. So that's why when you go back to Mark 12, when he says, so I'll send my wrath, to kill the tenants. Yeah. So it's the same application. And look, and you say, well, why? He explains it. Verse 16, but the Lord Almighty will be exalted by his justice, and the holy God will show himself holy by his righteousness. It's not like God is mad or angry or doing this, from bitterness or hate. He's demonstrating holiness and justice. I mean, this is, and what the story of Mark 12 represents are the prophets that he sent. That what did they do? They beat them.
They killed them.
And they killed them.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then he sent his son, and what they do to him? The very people he's talking to are fixed to kill him.
Yep.
I mean, what a parable.
A great point that we should point out that the my translation says slaves, but servants or slaves. These are the prophets that came before Jesus and proclaiming this kingdom and the coming of the Messiah, and they killed every one of them.
Yep.
Exactly.
That's the point.
I want to just read this one last thing, because in Isaiah 5, because in his demonstration of holy and justice, you're like, well, what is the big deal? This seems harsh of God. Well, watch what he accuses them of in verse 20. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil. They were justifying murdering these prophets, and even they're justifying persecuting Jesus. Who put darkness for light and light for darkness? Who put bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter? Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and clever in their own sight. Well, this is starting to sound familiar just in the humanity of life on our planet. Woe to those who are heroes at drinking wine and champions at mixing drinks, who acquit the guilty for the bribe and deny justice to the innocent. Therefore, as tongues of fire lick up straw, and as dry grass sinks down in the flames, so their roots will decay and their flowers blow away like dust, for they have rejected the law of the Lord Almighty. I mean, whoa. So I think it's interesting and ironic and inspirational that Jesus tells these people who are questioning his authority this parable. I mean, you're drawing a line.
That's right.
We drew a line that would inspire them to do what? To put their faith and trust in Jesus and as the Son of God? Well, you hope. But it actually, and that's why we made the whole point the last podcast, is it actually was a dividing line where people, you have on one side people loving who this is and understand his grace and forgiveness and resurrection. And on the other side, you got people who are hating him because why? He's a threat to their power.
And what you just described is exactly why we believe in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and we'll get there in Mark 13, that then Jesus lays out the picture of the judgment that's going to come on these people. But God's grace is there because he's going to give them 40 years to have a chance to do the right thing. And a lot of them did. I mean, that's where the church came from.
It's almost like, I'm trying to think of a way to explain this and even understand it, but God's power, it's a given. It's like, we want to make it about power, but with God, his power is a given. Like, that's not even in the equation. And so when you see what he's accomplishing here, when it says the stone which the builders rejected, well, how'd they reject that stone? Well, they're going to kill him, right?
Yeah.
So that became the actual rejection of the stone. Then became the chief cornerstone. This came about from the Lord, and it is marvelous in our eyes. God accomplishes, like through the emptying of himself. His power is in the emptying of himself, and there's something pretty profound about that you can rest in that, right? Because everything that we fear, everything that we worship, all these things, like as humans, we're obsessed with power, and God's like, I'm so powerful that I can give up my power.
Yeah.
And still accomplish what I want to accomplish.
To your point, in Luke's version of this story, Luke 20, it's pretty well seems similar. It's like in verse 16, he'll come and kill those tenants and give the vineyard to others. When the people heard this, may this never be. Jesus looked directly at them and said, Then what is the meaning of that which is written? The stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. But watch what he adds here in Luke's version. Everyone who falls on that stone will be broken to pieces, but he on whom it falls will be crushed. And that's why I said he's drawing a line in the sand. This earthly power and success and comfort and recognition, what is it going to really do for you in the end? Somebody else is just going to take it up, and you're going to be like a crushed little flower.
So how many people during a current election on what direction the country ought to go? I never heard anybody mention Jesus.
Well, we're talking about that next podcast, because now we get into the politics on the next paragraph.
Did anybody say anything about, what about if we're
addressing that? That's a good tease, Phil.
Perfect tease. In
the overtime, I wanted to bring up the practical side of what that means, him furnishing the wine press and the watchtower, and because it made me think of that 2 Peter 1:3 when he says he's given us everything we need for life and godliness, because that was his underlying point that nobody's really declaring. He gave them everything they need to understand. It wasn't like he bamboozled them.
It was a tough sell then, and it's still a tough sell now.
And it brings a lot of other text to light I want to talk about in the overtime, too. Yep. So if you want to follow us over, blazetv.com/unashamed, use the promo code Phil. You're going to get $10 off your subscription as we dive a little more into this meaty topic.
Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by rating us on iTunes. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube, and be sure to click that little bell to get notified about new episodes. And for even more content that you won't get anywhere else, subscribe to Blaze TV at blazetv.com/unashamed.